Today, I'm going to be talking about the foreign policies of the US and China. These are the two countries with the largest economies in the world. So let us examine their foreign policies and see how they differ. Let's start with the US. In order to talk about American foreign policy, we have to talk about the neoconservatives, or neocons for short, and their role in influencing American foreign policy. Well, who or what are the neocons? During the time of the Cold War, a group of people in the US decided that the US must squash every remnant of communism abroad and safeguard America's place in the world as the greatest and only hegemon in the world. So they took on, these neocons led the US to take on extreme interventionist foreign policies in order to safeguard or to protect democracy. They believe that the US must execute and show their military might and prowess overseas. These voices are called the neocons. They believe in the military industrial complex. They believe that the US must be the only and largest country in the world. Economically, that is, the US must flex its military might. There must never be a rival to the US. And communism, we must ensure that there is no other system of government other than democracy, because democracy is for America's best interest. Listen to Jeffrey Sachs as he describes the neocons.
The neocons, who have run the show for 30 years, believe the U.S. can do whatever it wants. This is the most fundamental point to understand about U.S. foreign policy. They're wrong. They keep screwing up. They keep getting us into trillion-dollar-plus wars. They keep killing a lot of people. But their basic belief is the U.S. is the only superpower, it's the unipolar power, and we can do what we want. So
I believe it was these same interventionist foreign policy we saw during the time of the Cold War. And we saw a prolific neocon. I think Henry Kissinger took on extreme interventionist foreign policy and would go on to bomb Cambodia, a country that was a neutral third party in the Vietnam War. Also, during the time of the Vietnam War, 2 million tons of bombs were dropped on Laos during 1964 to 1973. 2 million tons of bombs, guys. Like, a lot of Americans aren't even aware of how insanely bombed Laos was. It was these same interventionist foreign policy that would go on to see the same Henry Kissinger being complicit in overthrowing an elected president in Chile in 1970. These same interventionist foreign policy that the US adopted, led by the neocons, would see America invade Iraq looking for weapons of mass destruction, because no other country in the world can have any weapons of mass destruction aside from the US. Not that any country should have weapons of mass destruction if we're all striving for peace. These very same neocons would see the US bomb Belgrade to set up a NATO base there. They would invade Grenada in 1983 for fear of socialism. And now these neocons are making every effort to set up a NATO base next to the border of Russia in Ukraine. Can you imagine a country setting up a military base next to the border of the USA? That would absolutely not fly with the US. Right now, there's a military base in Germany. Can you imagine Germany having a military base in the US? Can you imagine China setting up a military base on the border of the US? That would not fly. This is the same US that This was the same US that invaded Grenada in 1983 because they did not want a socialist country in their backyard. So how is it now that they're saying the war in Ukraine is unprovoked when the US is trying to set up a NATO base on the border of Russia? And now two countries that once coexisted peacefully are now at war with each other. And then we're told the war was unprovoked.
I'm here on the floor of the Senate for the 23rd week in a row to bring to the attention of the Senate, to my constituents, and to the American people the latest news of Russia's illegal, unprovoked, and brutal war against Ukraine.
And in the president's statement, he says, the prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life.
Yes, that is a foreign policy of the US. All over the world, you can see US flexing its military might, demonstrating its military prowess, and that is the foreign policy of the US. We will not use diplomatic relationships to solve our problems. No, we will bomb our way onto our solutions. That is a foreign policy of the US. And if we don't like a country, our allies, please line up. And also, you also are not doing business. You are also not trading with that country, and we are going to sanction you until you fall in line. And we're going to use our dollar, and we're going to weaponize our dollar. We're going to take your money. We're going to take your money that you gave to us, and we're going to sanction you, and you're not going to be able to use our dollar. That is a foreign policy of the US. With all that I have said, you cannot question why the US is so anti-China, but why the US-controlled media covers China with so much hostility. It's because China dares to question this American-led world order. Is because China always find a way to escape the encirclement that the US puts around China. It's because China is trying to operate in a way that is beneficial for their country and not be subjected to the rules created by the US. China defies American orders. That is why America is so anti-China. I truly don't believe that is because China is a communist country. America has worked with dictatorship countries to accomplish their missions and agendas overseas. So I think if China was more pro-USA and would just follow the America world order that America is trying to accomplish, then absolutely the US would not be so anti-China. But China dares to operate in a way that is not dictated by the US. Now, in speaking about China, let's talk about China's foreign policy. So China's foreign policy emerged at a time when China was trying to build international relations with non-communist countries in Asia and the rest of the world. There was growing fear that China wanted to spread communism to the rest of the world rather, and had expansionist ideals. The policies of mutual respect for sovereignty, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, territorial integrity, mutual non-aggression, peaceful coexistence reassured countries that China was not trying to impress communism upon them, but rather trying to develop a diplomatic and trading relationship with these countries. That is how China's foreign policy emerged, in my opinion. Also, the century of humiliation by the Japanese, colonialism by the British, invasion by the Mongols have also shaped China's sensitivity toward sovereignty and non-interference, because China has experienced significant interference and invasion in their country, in their internal and domestic affairs. Also, we cannot talk about China's foreign policy without mentioning Confucianism and its role on China's culture and by extension China's foreign policy. Principles such as harmony and social order that was stressed by Confucius, we can see that in how China respects international norms and the sovereignty of other countries. Further, Confucius taught mianzi, face, having face and prestige. And you can see this principle in how China always tries to project positivity to the rest of the world, try to only show the good side of China. And there are many good things to be shown in China. And I do believe that China's efforts to try to project positivity is what gets China labeled as a propagandist country sometimes, because China tries its very best to show the positive to the world. I do believe that is a principle of Confucius that I see in China's international affairs and how China projects itself to the world. It is these principles of mutual respect, non-interference that would see China develop and build international relationship with neighboring countries such as Indonesia, Thailand, Mongolia, Cambodia, and other Asian countries and other non-communist international countries in the world. And it was these policies of peaceful coexistence that would see China broker a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This move saw many countries calling China the global peace truce broker. And so that is the nature of China's international relationship, always acting in a peaceful way, using diplomacy. China is one of those countries right now that you see they engage in diplomatic relationship, engage in diplomacy to solve conflict. China has resolved many conflicts with neighbors without engaging in military combats. I'm not saying China is doing all of this out of pure benevolence and China is just going around handing out free lunches. No. China is doing this because it benefits China. The purpose of international relationship is to act in a way that is beneficial to one's country. But the point is they're not using military combat to solve their problems or to accomplish their missions. And I do believe that if countries were engaged in actual diplomacy, diplomatic relationships, solving problems diplomatically, then there would be fewer wars in the world. And a world with fewer wars, we can all agree, is a much peaceful, much better world. And our children, grandchildren can grow up to inherit a peaceful world. That is the dream.